We are reporting for you tonight on the eve of the arraignment of a former president. Tomorrow marks the first court hearing in this case, New York versus Donald Trump, defendant. This is the legal process which compelled Trump to come to New York today from Florida because he had to. The only alternative would have been resisting arrest and making the NYPD come get him, which they're capable of doing for any defendant. Tomorrow, Trump goes downtown to the New York court building, and like any citizen or any criminal defendant, he will then surrender temporarily to the custody of the lawful authorities there. We know a bit about that process, the fingerprinting, the booking, and like anyone, afforded his rights and given the opportunity to enter his plea. Now, authorities have ramped up security, including thousands of members of NYPD that we're told are on a stand-ready order. But lately, Donald Trump has been trying to promote and fundraise off the charges. And it's worth recalling tonight, as we know more than we used to, no more than we did last week, this promotional effort by Mr. Trump is actually his plan B, after the calls for protests repeatedly fizzled. There were no large crowds for Donald Trump in Florida or New York today compared to the infamous influx of visitors which did gather for the convicted sedition on January 6th in D.C. Now, New York authorities say this time they see no signs of that level of gathering as of tonight. They also say quite clearly and publicly they will both deter and confront and arrest any attempts at disruption or violence tomorrow. So that's the terrain tonight as the United States embarks on this fundamentally legal process. I could tell you a few more updates. Donald Trump now swiftly beefing up his legal team. He's tapped a new former federal prosecutor as lead counsel, Todd Blanche, to lead his lawyers on this New York case. We know that's new because that lawyer actually recently left his firm, emailing colleagues he decided to, quote, represent Trump in the recently charged DA case. Well, news of that recent charging famously broke on Thursday. So the email sounds like it was written since then. Now, Trump's lawyers are also asking the judge to bar cameras from the courtroom tomorrow. Now, that does continue the usual practice in New York, but it also serves as a reminder that while Donald Trump claims to welcome any and all publicity, and his team tried to do their version of publicity during the day today, the claim that they welcome all publicity as a posture is false. It's demonstrably false. Mr. Trump prizes the images that he can control and that he thinks show him in control. While tomorrow, the idea, the prospect of one photographer capturing one possible image of him in this process under the legal and literal custody of others, following rules he did not set in court, that's an image he's trying to prevent. So again, let's keep an eye on the facts, the ball, the law, the evidence, and not overreact to demonstrably false claims like, oh, he welcomes all of this, he's into it. Well, if he welcomed all of it, he would allow or not oppose photos tomorrow during it. Now, we're going to do this in an orderly way. I promise you that. That's how we've always tried to cover the news here. And this is a different kind of news, and there are a lot of pressures and some big passions out there in the country as we go forward. So we're just going to do this straight up. What will happen tomorrow? We turn to the law, which is supposed to apply equally to all people, even if it's big news that it's being applied to a former president. So here is, right now, the official New York Unified Court System rules and how they explain it directly to defendants facing what Trump faces tomorrow, arraignment. Defendants are told the arraignment is the first time you go to court in front of a judge. You're told what the charges are against you and what your rights are. You answer the charges by telling the court if you are guilty or not guilty. Trump will enter that plea tomorrow, speaking the words, we're told he's expected to plead not guilty. So Donald Trump tomorrow will speak the words, quote, not guilty, in open court. And he will not be allowed to make any other remarks in that setting under this arraignment process. That's under the rules. Now, then under this kind of case, we know under the rules he will be released. And here's what all defendants, including Donald Trump, are told about that. If you are released, you must come back to court for every court date. If you don't come to court, the judge will order a warrant for your arrest. This means that the police will be notified to find and arrest you and bring you to court. That applies to Donald Trump and everyone else who's a citizen or person inside the jurisdiction, in this case of New York, just as the law applies to everyone inside the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, that reference there is to what's sometimes called a bench warrant, which is the judge's power, in this case a kind of unitary power, meaning they decide and there comes the warrant, to bring people back by force if needed. I mention that tonight because it is the same power which made Donald Trump come to New York today. So while he tried to up the spectacle of this or claim he's fundraising off this, as is often the case, remember, the real story may be off camera and away from the PR and the political rhetoric. Today was a legally compelled trip, just as Trump's future appearances at this court in this process will not be his decision or at his discretion. If the case isn't dismissed and heads towards trial, as long as the case is open, the people with power here are the DA, who drives the process, the charges, much of the timeline, and then, of course, the judge who oversees this and can check the DA's power. And if the DA oversteps or is seen as lacking evidence or being political, there's a judge there to check them. And if this reaches trial, then the people on the jury will matter, not Donald Trump or his political allies or his press tactics or his internet posts or his claims, some of which are demonstrably false, that he's into this, that he welcomes this, that today was a trip he chose to take. This is the rule of law in America. This is how it works. These are the defendant's rights, but also the defendant's obligations. And as you will hear us say throughout the process, because we take it seriously, the burden remains on the government, on that same powerful DA, to prove the case. The defendant does not have a burden in our system. When it is well and properly applied, the defendant is supposed to be, in all senses, legally presumed innocent.